Imagine a nightmare scenario where an invisible wall of death stretches for miles, where every step you take could be your last, and where machines hunt you relentlessly from the sky and ground. This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now in Kupiansk, Ukraine, where something that sounds like it shouldn't exist is systematically destroying Russian forces. I'm Elizabeth Davis, and today I'm going to reveal how Ukraine has created a robot army that's achieving the impossible. A 27-to-1 casualty rate against Russian invaders. What you're about to discover is rewriting the rules of modern warfare, and it's changing everything we thought we knew about how wars are fought in the 21st century. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening in Kupiansk right now. Fewer than 100 Russian soldiers remain in this strategic city, and that number is dropping by the day. Just weeks ago, Vladimir Putin made a grand proclamation that Kupiansk had been captured, another victory to add to his list of territorial gains. But Putin's celebration was premature, catastrophically so. Ukraine has systematically destroyed the occupiers, and those final 100 or so Russian troops are now trapped in a city that has become their graveyard, surrounded by something they cannot fight, cannot escape, and barely understand. Russia is desperately trying to reinforce its positions around Kupiansk. But here's the terrifying reality for Putin's forces. Every soldier sent to Kupiansk is walking into what military analysts are calling a kill zone, a technological death trap so effective that it's destroying up to 88% of Russian troops before they even reach their intended positions. Think about that statistic for a moment. 88%. That means out of every 100 Russian soldiers sent toward Kupiansk, only 12 survive long enough to even attempt their mission. And most of those 12 won't survive much longer. On January 20th, Russia launched several desperate attempts to regain some foothold in or around Kupiansk, trying to reverse the catastrophic damage Ukraine has inflicted on Russian forces since December. To the north of Kupiansk, Russian commanders ordered assaults against the settlement of Holubivka. East of the city, attacks were directed toward Petropavlivka, Podoli, and Kucherivka. Russia also attempted to advance from the southeast, where forces tried to gain footholds in Pishchain, Stepova Novoselivka, and Kurilivka. The strategy is obvious. Russia wants to encircle Kupiansk, cut off Ukrainian supply lines, and trap the defenders inside before overwhelming them with superior numbers. It's a classic military maneuver that has worked countless times throughout history. But there's a problem, a massive technological problem that Russia's commanders apparently didn't anticipate or couldn't counter even if they did. The Institute for the Study of War, one of the most respected military analysis organizations tracking this conflict, delivered a devastatingly simple verdict on what Putin hoped would be a busy and successful January 20th. Though Russian forces continued offensive operations across multiple axes of advance, they did not advance. Not 1 meter, not 1 inch. Complete failure across the board. The obvious question is why? How can a military force that supposedly has numerical superiority, artillery advantage, and air support fail so completely to make even minimal territorial gains? The answer is both fascinating and terrifying, depending on which side of this conflict you're on. Ukraine has created kill zones around Kupiansk that are so massive, so technologically sophisticated, and so deadly effective that Russian soldiers cannot penetrate the seemingly never-ending seas of drones they need to get past if they're to launch anything resembling an effective assault. Let me explain what a kill zone actually is, because this isn't just a military term. It's a revolutionary approach to warfare that Ukraine has pioneered out of desperate necessity. According to reporting from the New Voice of Ukraine, the kill zone around Kupiansk is effectively a wall of first-person view drones, commonly called FPV drones, that stretches up to 25 kilometers, that's about 15 miles, from the Kupiansk combat lines. Picture this vast area, roughly the size of a small city, completely saturated with autonomous and semi-autonomous drones constantly on the prowl. These aren't just random patrols. With the aid of reconnaissance drones flying high overhead, Ukraine's FPV attack drones are conducting coordinated seek-and-destroy missions that are massively restricting Russian infantry movement and obliterating the few vehicles Russia sends toward Kupiansk long before they reach positions where they could actually be useful in assaults. The restriction on Russian movement is so severe that military analysts report Russian forces can only maneuver within a single kilometer of safe space. 1 kilometer. For context, a typical infantry assault requires coordinating movements across several kilometers to achieve tactical objectives, establish supply lines, and provide mutual support between units. Russian forces have been compressed into such a tiny operational area that they've become sitting ducks, easy targets whether they're inside the kill zone or desperately trying to avoid it. At least those who remain are in danger. Most are already dead. Let that sink in. We're not talking about a hard-fought battle where casualties mount over weeks of intense combat. We're talking about systematic, almost industrial-scale elimination of Russian forces before they can even engage Ukrainian defenders in traditional combat. The Ukrainian unit responsible for this nightmare scenario is called Orion, And according to military outlet Militarny, they've set up a near impenetrable robot army that Russian forces now have to navigate daily. The term robot army isn't hyperbole or propaganda. It's an accurate description of what Ukraine has deployed. This is autonomous warfare on a scale never before seen in modern combat, and it's proving devastatingly effective. The kill zone doesn't rely on a single type of technology. Instead, it's a layered, integrated system that combines multiple platforms working in concert. Lelika reconnaissance drones are constantly in the air, their sophisticated cameras and sensors searching for any sign of Russian movement. These high-altitude observation platforms provide real-time intelligence to Ukrainian operators who coordinate the entire defensive network. FPV drones and Mavic drones are primed and waiting, loitering in designated areas until reconnaissance assets locate a target. Once a Russian soldier or vehicle is spotted, these attack drones are dispatched with frightening speed and accuracy, but it gets even more sophisticated. Ukraine has also deployed ground robots, autonomous or remotely operated vehicles that navigate the battlefield independently. The exact role of these ground robots remains somewhat unclear due to operational security, but military analysts believe they serve both logistical purposes and direct combat functions. About 2 weeks ago, reports emerged of a Ukrainian ground robot that traveled over 20 kilometers, approximately 12 miles, across contested terrain to deliver an explosive payload of 12 anti-tank mines directly to a Russian position. The robot navigated autonomously, avoided detection, placed its deadly cargo, and returned to Ukrainian lines without a single human operator needing to enter the danger zone. Now imagine what a machine like that could do to entrenched Russian soldiers attempting to plan an assault near Kupiansk. It wouldn't be pretty, and it represents yet another threat that Russian troops have to worry about as aerial drones constantly buzz overhead, reconnaissance satellites track their movements, and ground-based robotic systems hunt them through the ruins and forests. A story reported by Militarny offers the perfect, chilling example of what awaits any Russian forces attempting to navigate the Kupiansk kill zone. The outlet documented the case of a captured Russian soldier who goes by the call sign Begunok, which translates roughly to runner. His assigned role was to guide groups of Russian soldiers through Ukraine's kill zone so they could launch their assaults on Ukrainian positions. Stop and think about that job description for a moment. Begunok's task was essentially to be a human pathfinder through a technological minefield where invisible death lurks around every corner, where drones track every movement, and where the survival rate is 12% at best. You have to wonder which commander Begunok angered to earn this suicidal assignment. Was he being punished? Was he considered expendable? Or did Russian leadership genuinely believe this strategy could work? Here's the truly remarkable part of Begunok's story. He survived his trips through the kill zone, all 3 of them. That alone makes him statistically extraordinary, almost impossibly lucky. But as for the soldiers he was tasked with guiding to safety, every single one was destroyed. On all 3 attempts, Begunok ended up as the sole survivor, the last man standing as Ukrainian drones systematically eliminated everyone around him. Finally, after watching 3 entire units wiped out while he somehow survived, Begunok did the only rational thing. He waved a white flag and surrendered to one of Ukraine's drones. And honestly, who can blame him? As Militarny points out, Ukraine's deployment of such a wide variety of drone platforms near Kupiansk means that every Russian soldier attempting infiltration always runs out of time before being located and eliminated. The technology enables continuous space surveillance without requiring constant human presence on the front lines, which is crucial for Ukraine given its manpower disadvantages compared to Russia. Ukrainian operators can monitor vast areas from relatively safe positions, directing their robot army to engage threats as they appear. In a typical engagement scenario around Kupiansk, up to 5 FPV drones, and sometimes as many as 12, operate on a single target simultaneously. Think about what that means from the perspective of a Russian soldier. One drone pursuing you would be terrifying enough. An explosive-laden machine flying faster than you can run, maneuvering through obstacles with precision, and piloted by an operator who is trained specifically to kill people like you. Now multiply that terror by 12. A dozen drones all converging on your position, coordinating their attack angles, ensuring that even if you somehow evade or shoot down 1 or 2, the others will complete their mission. It's a death sentence, plain and simple. There's no tactical response, no clever maneuver, no amount of training or equipment that gives an individual soldier a realistic chance of survival against that kind of assault. This overwhelming drone superiority represents the solution to a critical problem Ukraine faced in the Kupiansk sector several months before the kill zone strategy was fully developed. Vladislav Zolotarov, an officer with the Orion unit, explained the strategic thinking to Militarny in terms that reveal Ukraine's sophisticated understanding of modern warfare. We understood that the problem was not the number of people or equipment, Zolotarov said. We had to take away the enemy's very ability to move and gain a foothold. And it really is that elegantly simple. An enemy who cannot gain a foothold cannot push forward. An enemy who cannot push forward can only wander aimlessly as Ukrainian drones systematically hunt them down. What Ukraine has created is a dedicated drone wall that demolishes Russian forces before they can threaten Ukrainian positions. But the implications go far beyond just Kupiansk. As mentioned earlier, these walls may represent the answer to Ukraine's fundamental strategic challenge: how to deal maximum damage to numerically superior Russian forces while keeping Ukrainian soldiers out of harm's way. The Institute for the Study of War has identified this as potentially transformative for the entire conflict. According to their assessment, Ukraine now has an opportunity to deny Russian advances across the entire front line and even enable counteroffensive operations of its own by replicating the robot army strategy that proved so effective in Kupiansk throughout other sectors. This would genuinely be a game changer for the war, though it would require Ukraine to have enough drones, along with trained operators to pilot them, to work across a front line that currently stretches approximately 1,250 kilometers, roughly 800 miles. That's a tremendous amount of territory to cover, requiring potentially hundreds of thousands of drones operating simultaneously. But here's the remarkable thing: Ukraine may actually have enough drones to make this happen, especially if it prioritizes deployment in sectors where Russian attacks are most intense. The ISW suggests that replication of the Kupiansk model could be complemented by an increase in kill zone depth, expanding the deadly buffer zone even further. Ukraine could significantly degrade the effectiveness of Russian infiltration tactics if Ukrainian forces deny Russian forces from operating vehicles within 50-plus kilometers of the front line, the think tank suggests, thereby forcing Russian infantry to infiltrate greater and untenable distances on foot. It's an ambitious goal, requiring Ukraine to project lethal drone coverage 50 kilometers, about 30 miles, behind Russian lines. But there's evidence Ukraine is already implementing exactly this strategy. Euromaidan Press highlighted in a December report that kill zones now cover not only the Kupiansk sector, but also the heavily contested regions of Pokrovsk and Dobropilya. Across all these areas, Ukraine is combining intense drone activity with coordinated air and artillery strikes that pummel Russian soldiers and equipment on both sides of the front lines. The expansion is happening rapidly and systematically. Ruslan Muzychuk, spokesman for Ukraine's National Guard, explained the evolving concept. A kill zone is not just the area between our positions and Russian positions, he said. It can extend beyond the defensive line, and it must be calculated in both directions. This deepening of kill zones is happening partly because Russia has started creating its own drone-filled defensive areas to prevent Ukrainian counterattacks. However, from a strategic perspective, these zones are far more important to Ukraine than to Russia. Yes, Russia wants to prevent Ukraine from reclaiming occupied territory, but ultimately, Russia is the attacking force in this conflict. It's Putin, not Zelensky, who is ordering soldiers to charge mindlessly toward Ukrainian defenses and straight into the kill zones. With their robot armies, Ukrainian soldiers can operate in relatively small units behind their kill zones because they know that the few Russian troops who somehow make it through the gauntlet will be disorganized, depleted, and easier to counter. These survivors have just navigated through a technological nightmare by the skin of their teeth, only to enter territory where alert Ukrainian defenders are actively hunting for them. For Ukraine, Russian kill zones also pose dangers, but Ukraine approaches offensive operations much more deliberately than Russia, typically launching attacks only when intelligence suggests a high probability of success. The upcoming arrival of mid-range drones into Ukrainian arsenals will be crucial for dealing with Russian defensive zones. Drones like Ukraine's Bulava and Ram-2X can travel distances up to 100 kilometers, about 62 miles. If Ukrainian intelligence identifies a Russian drone operator headquarters or control center, these long-range strike drones can eliminate them, effectively shutting down entire sections of Russian defensive zones and clearing the way for Ukrainian counterattacks. It's a chess game played with robots and explosives, where eliminating the enemy's command and control nodes creates opportunities for exploitation. But it's on defense where Ukraine's drone walls prove most valuable. The current priority, especially for expanding the system as the ISW recommends, is ensuring Ukraine has sufficient drone inventory. And remarkably, Ukraine appears to be ahead of the curve on production and procurement. In terms of pure numbers, Ukraine has invested billions of dollars into manufacturing and acquiring the short-range drones necessary to populate its kill zones. On December 24th, the Kyiv Independent reported Ukraine was on track to receive approximately 3 million drones by the end of 2025. That's according to former Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal, who pointed out this represents almost 2.5 times more drones than Ukraine built or purchased by the end of 2024. 3 million drones. That's an almost incomprehensible number, enough to saturate the entire front line with overlapping coverage and maintain continuous operations, even accounting for mechanical failures, combat losses, and maintenance requirements. Ukraine has built and bought millions of drones for a specific reason, and the kill zones are almost certainly that reason. However, Ukraine's leadership recognizes they could always use more capability. On January 21st, the Straits Times reported on Ukraine's ambitious plans to further expand drone production. According to the country's new defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, Ukraine intends to rely heavily on drones as a tool of asymmetric warfare, part of an attritional strategy designed to force Russia to end the war on terms favorable to Ukraine. Fedorov has announced plans to replace Ukraine's Chinese-made Mavic drones with domestically produced models, a strategically smart move. The less Ukraine depends on imported weapons, especially from a nation that also supplies Russia with components and technology, the more sustainable and secure its defense efforts become. Ukraine is already developing a local version of the Mavic with the same camera capabilities and extended flight range, with testing potentially beginning this month. Ukraine is working fast and at industrial scale. If Fedorov's new technology-focused approach to national defense is executed effectively, the Kupiansk kill zone model may soon be replicated across the entire country, fundamentally changing the dynamics of this war. We've talked extensively about kill zones and their basic concept as no man's lands filled with drones. But beyond this surface understanding, it's worth examining the specific problems Ukraine's robot army creates for Russia as it tries to sustain the brutal assaults Putin's strategy requires. What kill zones do, perhaps better than any other defensive strategy Ukraine has employed, is transform massive swathes of territory into elaborate traps for Russian forces. Though drones are the headline weapons, these zones actually involve far more sophisticated layered defenses. United 24 media provided insight into what a Ukrainian kill zone actually looks like on the ground. And it's a masterpiece of defensive engineering. Layered defense using terrain to Ukraine's advantage is the key. Let me walk you through what a Russian soldier experiences when deployed into one of these zones. You know drones fly overhead. You can hear the faint buzzing at times, but the drones hide among trees and are often just out of sight. For all you know, a reconnaissance drone may already have you in its sights, and Ukrainian operators are preparing an FPV ambush somewhere deeper in the territory you've been ordered to take. Filled with fear, you push forward, but that's far from easy. You likely don't have armor support like a tank or armored vehicle. Even if you did, it would be almost pointless because Ukraine packs its kill zones with anti-tank mines, dragon's teeth concrete obstacles, and anti-tank ditches specifically designed to slow or immobilize vehicles. As you inch forward, you may see burnt-out husks of vehicles that attempted to cross before you, twisted metal testaments to what happens when armor enters the kill zone. But you don't have time to dwell on that. There are massive stretches of concertina wire placed to slow soldiers on foot. Hidden in the ground are networks of thin barbed wire called plutanka, barely visible but more than capable of shredding through boots into feet and ankles. You've heard rumors about tunnels built into these zones from which Ukrainian soldiers can observe or ambush advancing troops. This array of fortifications is theoretically navigable. If you're careful and lucky, you can work your way around obstacles and find clear passages through the kill zone. But here's what you don't realize. These are passages Ukraine intends you to find. You're being channeled, funneled into narrow routes surrounded by mines and wire. There's no turning back now. And that's when you hear the telltale buzz. An FPV drone is bearing down on your position, revealing that Ukraine has had eyes on you all along. Maybe you get lucky and somehow avoid or shoot down that drone. But it doesn't matter. More will come. You may face several simultaneously. There can only be one winner, and it won't be you. This is the reality of Ukraine's kill zones, and its clear drones are just one piece of a larger, integrated defensive puzzle. Zoom back to Kupiansk, and you now understand why these hellscapes are destroying 88% of Russian forces before they ever launch their assaults. As Politico describes it, the result is a gray area of chaos stretching some 20 kilometers from the front, where drones hunt for soldiers. The wounded are left to die because evacuation is nearly impossible, and supplies of ammunition, food, and water cannot reach fighting troops. Russia is attempting to adapt. Forbes writer Vikram Mittal noted in a January 16th article that one of the biggest benefits of Ukraine's kill zones is the operational disruption they cause. Stalemates result from Russian soldiers attempting to advance, only to be destroyed before reaching their objectives. Russia has increased its use of ground robots to counter the kill zones, though they're currently limited to ferrying supplies and occasionally placing explosive charges on Ukrainian positions if they can reach them. Russia is also sending increasingly smaller units, some as small as 5 soldiers, attempting to infiltrate through gaps in coverage. This isn't an effective strategy. Even if one of these tiny units makes it through to a city like Kupiansk, all they can do is entrench themselves and hope reinforcements arrive before Ukraine locates and eliminates them. Remember how I said only about 100 Russian soldiers remain in Kupiansk? This infiltration strategy is how Russia ended up in that desperate position. But above all else, the goal of Ukraine's kill zones is attrition in manpower, equipment, and resources. The Atlantic Council highlighted this in a January 15th article, noting Ukraine has invested heavily in upgrading defenses across the entire front line to continue the stalemate while systematically destroying Russian forces in the kill zones. Strengthening Ukraine's fortifications and addressing manpower shortages are among the top priorities for incoming Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, who made his name as Minister of Digital Transformation before taking this role. Fedorov has set an extraordinarily bold target for Ukraine's defenders. After explaining his first objective is reforming the defense ministry to ensure it can manage itself and Ukraine's military effectively, Fedorov outlined his goal for 2026. The second strategic objective is to kill 50,000 Russians per month, he revealed. Last month, 35,000 were killed, all these losses verified on video. If we reach 50,000, we will see what happens to the enemy. They view people as a resource, and shortages are already evident. 50,000 Russian casualties per month. That's a staggering, almost unimaginable number. But the kill zones are already contributing massively to current casualty rates. If the expansion the ISW recommends is paired with a Ukrainian defense ministry that further emphasizes drone warfare, Fedorov's goal may actually be achievable. After all, Ukraine now controls 90% of Kupiansk and is achieving a 27-to-1 casualty rate against Russia in that sector. That city may show Putin what awaits his forces as kill zones expand across the entire front. I'm Elizabeth Davis, and what we're witnessing in Kupiansk is nothing short of a revolution in warfare. A robot army that sounds like science fiction is systematically destroying one of the world's largest militaries. The implications go far beyond this single conflict. What Ukraine is pioneering today will shape how wars are fought for generations to come. The age of autonomous warfare has arrived, and it's proving far more deadly and effective than anyone imagined.